Marissa Hale greeted me at the curb with a tired smile that never reached her eyes. It was the look of someone who'd spent half her life waiting for an answer, and the other half convincing herself it doesn't even matter anymore. That expression is why I still take these jobs. You don't have to believe in the dead to recognize the living when they're drowning. She'd found me through a friend of a friend who knew I used to do this kind of work. It's called spirit mediation, house readings and that sort of stuff. The kind of paranormal consulting that gets you called a fraud until, someone's sobbing into your shoulder with gratitude and fear, terror. I've tried normal work. It never stuck. The money doesn't last, and neither does the silence. So when Marissa said the words my kind can't ignore, 20 years, unsolved, my parents, I booked the cheapest ticket I could find and told myself I'd quit again after this one. Her parents had been murdered in her own home. A low brick ranch at the quiet end of Briar Lane in a West Melbourne suburb that everyone had abandoned except the older folks and the stubborn. Marissa was 15 when it happened, lucky enough to be sleeping over at her grandmother's. The investigation had burned through the country like a brush fire. Detectives, reporters, whispers, nothing. 20 years later, the house still sat on the corner like a closed mouth. She never sold, never rented. She kept it exactly as it was, except for the boards on the windows and the dust that grows like moss on a rock. There was a neighbour left, an old woman in a sun hat tending a line of cracked planters on the porch next door. She glanced over as Marissa led me up the walk and lifted her hand in a small, polite wave. I waved back. The old woman's face held the impassive kindness of someone who's, watched time take and just place nothing back. It used to all be retirees. Widows mostly, Marissa said as she pushed open the brittle front door. Before everything. It's quiet now. It's always been quiet. The inside was like a hollow insect nest. The living room had been stripped to drywall, plaster and dust. No furniture, no photos, no spiders even. Just a single bulb dangling from the ceiling like an unblinking eye. Marissa drew back a nicotine-yellowed curtain, and sunlight washed across the floor, exposing the tracks of old footprints through grey powder. She walked me through the kitchen and down the hall, past 2 bedrooms whose doors stuck halfway. The air smelled like cool storage, and something a little more subtle underneath. Old metal and faint rot, like some kind of penny forgotten in a wet pocket. "Do what you need," she said, her arms wrapped around herself. "I'm not expecting miracles." "Good," I said. "Miracles are where people lie." I asked for a chair, and she brought me one from the kitchen. An old laminate seat, chrome legs scabbed with rust. I set it under the dangling bulb in the center of the living room, placed my hat flat on the seat, and exhaled. I asked Marissa to sit by the wall and not speak. She nodded. Her face was pallid and with nerves and tears just readying to burst forward. Now, I'm not a showman. There's no incense, there's no chanting. I just listen. People think hearing the dead means like catching radio on the other side of static. And that's kind of closer than you'd think. Most houses hum. The floor joists murmur, the walls retain warmth. Even the air inside remembers. If something is still there, it moves the memory around like water and you can feel it. So there I sat. I closed my eyes and I waited. I waited for a long time. It was only the outside world, the wind rattling leaves, a distant lawnmower, a crow complaining like an old hinge. The dust must have been disturbed by our steps. I could taste like chalk. My brain started the rational calculus of defeat. Alright, what do we do next? Explain the no refund policy in a kind voice, offer a follow-up at a discount, leave before sunset. Then I heard it. A damp, swallowed sound. A breath turned inward. Faint at first. So faint I thought it was the house settling. But then clearer. I heard weeping. Is someone here with us? I asked, keeping my voice calm and mundane, as if checking for a phone signal. The weeping paused. The bulb made a soft ping. Cooling or heating, who knows? A voice slid into the room in a way that didn't use air. Mechanical and thin, as if threaded through a picked guitar string. Can you hear me? Yes, I said. Who are you? Silence. Then it returned to soft crying, both near and far at once. I reported what I was hearing to Marissa in a low voice without making eye contact with her. I needed her steady, not hopeful. Please, I asked the empty room. Are you Mr. Hale? Mrs. Hale? The weeping cut off with a sound like a hand over a mouth. When the voice returned, it felt right next to my ear. Do you know where Miss Hale is? I want to tell her I'm sorry. Marissa shifted against the wall. The faint scrape of her shoe on dust. My heart ticked faster. A cold went through me. A thread from ear to chest. Sorry for what? I asked. The bulb flickered. A slow blink. The curtain lifted an inch, even though the window was closed. For what I did to her, the voice said. For killing her the way I did. I didn't look at Marissa. I didn't want to see her face change from cautious to devastated. I stared at the empty doorway instead. The scuffed door jamb. I don't think this is your family, I said, low enough that I could pretend I was thinking aloud. Spirits lie. And broken minds, well, they pretend. Sometimes you get a house's echo or a person's memory. Sometimes you get something that feeds on the shape of grief so well it thinks it owns it. Who are you? I asked, and the answer just didn't come. The voice resumed weeping. It was almost childlike. I considered ending it right there, but something in the tone and an undernote I couldn't place just kept me listening. Do you know what happened that night? I asked. A long pause, and then, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. She shouldn't have had to die. Interesting. Guilt with its own shape. What about Mr. Hale? I asked. The man got what he deserved. The room's temperature dropped as the voice darkened. The bulb jittered. A stutter of lightning caught in a glass. I'd read enough of the file to know what the crime scene suggested. He'd been stabbed in bed. Many times. Dozens. A frenzy. She had had her throat cut. And there was signs of a struggle in the hall. Rage, obsession, a botched confession. It all fit well enough to be true. But the world is full of dangerous fits. Why did you do it? I asked. If you want peace, tell me. It's the only way you leave this house and see anything else again. Another pause. When the voice came back, it had a quiver that made my stomach turn because it actually sounded human now. That's always worse than the monster voice. Monsters are simple. Humans, on the other hand, not so much. Because I loved her more than anything, the voice said. I watched her every day. getting in her car, walking the dog, buying groceries. The way she'd wave, the way she'd look back to see if anyone was behind her. She was careful. She was so careful I thought that meant I mattered to her, that she knew I was there. That doesn't explain why you killed her, I said. I didn't want to. The voice turned into a whisper. It sounded like static. The bulb popped, raining a fine glimmer of glass. Marissa flinched but didn't scream. The room dimmed to grey window light. I wanted him gone, it said, the breath hitching in a mimicry of sobs. So we could be together. But she wouldn't accept it. She wouldn't come with me. The weeping resumed, even closer now, as if the room had taken another step closer to me. The hairs on my arms rose. I asked a few more questions. It retreated into hiccuped silence. I knew the shape now. I didn't know the face. And I needed that face. I stood. I'm gonna go get a glass of water, I told Marissa. If there's no running water here, I'll ask the neighbour. I'll be back in a minute. Her eyes were white around the irises, and she nodded without speaking. I could feel the room watching me as I walked out. The neighbour's house was the same build as the Hales, only someone actually lived there. Curtains that had faded honestly. A wind chime clinked with the occasional ring of a glass spoon in a teacup. I knocked, and after a few beats the door opened. The old woman from the porch. She stood small and straight in a pale dress that might have been blue once. She had the kind of hands that look clean even when they're covered in flour. Hello, she said warmly. Did you need help with something? Sorry to trouble you, I said politely. I'm across the way with Miss Hale. No water. Do you mind if I get a glass? Of course. Come on in. Her living room held a sun-faded couch and an oval rug that had been vacuumed in lines. On the wall, a portrait of her and a man in their 30s, smiling like people do when they still think every summer will arrive. She caught me looking, and her face tightened but then relaxed. It was like a tiny lightning strike in a clear sky. She brought me water in a jam jar and returned to the kitchen island where a hill of dough sagged under her hands. She pushed and she folded, she kneaded the dough. The smell in her house was clean and warm. It smelled like yeast and lemon cleaner. I like to bake when the humidity's low, she said, making conversation. It's quite rare we get a day like this. Smells wonderful, I said, and took a slow sip. You two look happy in that photo. He left, she said to the dough. Long time ago. It was a relief in some ways. She said this with the tone of someone who's given up on lies. You learn how to close the house against one wind and then another comes along. She glanced up at me with clear, pale eyes. You're with Marissa. I am. What are you doing in there? Her voice was mild, curious. The dough squeaked under her palms. Well, I'm actually a medium, I said. She laughed, a small, controlled sound. Is that what they call it now? Sometimes they call it worse. Did you know the Hales? We all knew each other. There were fewer of us. You help each other with trash day and watch each other's porches when the storms roll in. Did you hear anything the night that, it happened? Whole neighborhood heard when the sirens came, she said. Before that? No. They were good people. Quiet. That's all anyone ever says about the dead. I set the jar on the counter carefully, just to have my hands empty. I had a hunch, a shape the voice had left in the air. If the killer's spirit was tied to the house, it means he died nearby. If he knew her routines, he lived close. Obsession feeds on convenience. There weren't many homes left occupied now, and the way her eyes had flicked to the portrait and back, grief plus anger plus something hot and secret. "You know, he talked to me," I said. She stopped kneading. The dough slumped in her hands. "Who did?" she asked, too lightly, like someone feigning nonchalance. "Your husband." Now, she didn't move for 3 seconds. Then she started kneading again, slower. "He's not here." "He told me what he did to Mrs. Hale," I said. "He told me about the knife. He told me about the way she tried to run." I was lying with confidence. I had no proof beyond pattern and the way the voice said wave. Her hand slid off the dough and curled into fists on the countertop. She kept her eyes on the surface, and when she spoke, her voice was small. "I thought if I kept the yard nice, it wouldn't matter anymore. I thought if I smiled at God and the mailman and the meter reader, he'd forgot what I did." "And what did you do?" I asked. She opened a drawer and took out a folded dish towel, pressed it against her mouth. When she let it go, a wet square marked it. "He came home with blood on his shirt. He put it in the sink like I wouldn't see. Told me he'd finally told her how he felt. He looked lighter, taller, if you understand. He thought he'd done something good. I asked him where the blood came from, and he said I would thank him someday." Her eyes tipped up to mine. "I went to the bedroom. I took the gun from the nightstand. I shot him once. He didn't make anything. He just fell." "And where is he now?" "I dug." She said that so simply. "I was a girl on a farm. I know how to dig. I did it at 3 a.m. with the porch light off. No one looks out windows here at night. They tell themselves it's rude." Marissa would want closure. The police would want bones. The old woman would go to prison for an act most juries would call mercy too late. "You can tell her he ran," she said, her voice growing small again. "I've always told people he ran. No one asks questions if you say a man ran." I could hear the house across the street exhale. Houses watch each other. They remember. I went back to Marissa. Her skin had a grey sheen. "Well?" she asked. For Marissa, finding the truth was all that mattered, and I gave it to her. Her family had been killed by a neighbour obsessed with her mother. In an act of desperation, he took advantage of the night to break into the house and confess his feelings, just as she'd gone to the kitchen for a glass of water. When she rejected him, he grabbed her and he slit her throat with a sharp fish knife. Then, in a fit of rage, he walked into the bedroom where her father slept and stabbed him to death as well. It took me a few more sessions with the killer, with the spirit, to get the whole truth out. The old lady confirmed and admitted to Marissa that she'd suspected her husband all along. And when she confronted him, he fled, never to be found, probably dying somewhere years later. The end. Or at least, that's the end that I told Marissa. I can't say she was happy about it, but at least now she could finally be at peace. When he arrogantly admitted to the crime, showing no remorse, the wife, she shot him with the handgun they kept under the bed and buried him, like a good farm girl. When I left, I advised the old lady to lie. It'd keep her safe from any legal trouble, and her husband was a scumbag. I feel like that way everything just kind of ends up in its right place. The old woman in her home, and the husband trapped inside that house, shackled there, drowning in his own regrets. Fuck his peace. That's the end.